One News can reveal details of the government's plan to tackle sexual harassment in the workplace. It comes after employees at law firm Russell McVeigh were accused of inappropriate behaviour towards student interns. Brian Boswell has more.
Workplace harassment is in the spotlight. Now Green MP Jan Logie, a survivor of sexual assault, is determined to stamp it out.
Time's up. Enough of these kind of dinosaur views and misuses of power.
Good evening. Texting behind the wheel is being blamed for a horror crash which has left a police officer with life-altering injuries. The senior constable lost part of his leg when he and a colleague were pinned against their patrol car in southwest Sydney. A 22-year-old man has been refused bail in part due to his appalling driving record.
Jacob Thornton sits in the gutter.
The Black Panther may be the film's star, but he doesn't stand alone. The women are front and center.
The women in this movie aren't hypersexualized. We're shown as strong, intelligent, beautiful, graceful, dignified women. We're women in all her glory.
We're fierce warriors.
Inside Edition caught up with 3 of the ladies who are part of Black Panther's elite fight squad.
You may not have heard of neuromorphic computer chips, but thanks to a Canterbury scientist, that's about to change. Professor Simon Brown has developed a chip that mimics the human brain and within a decade could be powering everyday devices. Donna Marie Lever has the story.
At first glance, this could be an expensive state-of-the-art espresso machine, except it doesn't make coffee.
Apple users are once again faced with an app-crashing bug that renders some of the most widely used messaging applications unusable. And it happens when a certain character is texted to any iPhone running iOS 11.2.5. This Indian language character is the one responsible for the crash, and according to tech blog Mobile World, once it has been texted to an iPhone, you will no longer be able to access certain messaging apps including iMessage, WhatsApp, and Gmail.
I used amphetamine to stay awake. Every spare second I'd play video games from Friday night to Sunday night. I wouldn't sleep. I'd sit in front of the computer, just obsessing, with one hand on the keyboard and one hand on the mouse.
The only way to fix the problem is if the person who sent you the character goes into the conversation and deletes it. So if you're maliciously sent a text containing the symbol, good luck getting the culprit to remove it. Apple has been dealing with issue after issue on iPhone handsets in recent months, and there are even rumors that the company may delay the release of the next operating system.
It is, however, expensive. $750,000 worth of metal that's part of a groundbreaking creation.
And it's the only microscope in New Zealand that allows you to see individual atoms.
And that's important when you're working with nanotechnology.
You can't see anything with a naked eye or even with an ordinary microscope.
Physics professor Simon Brown is developing a neuromorphic computer chip.
She'll be working with the Ministers of Justice, Workplace Relations, State Services and Women.
We are going to look at everything that we can do to make sure that our workplaces are safe and that victims are supported if something does go wrong.
The Employment Act and the Human Rights Act will be reviewed. WorkSafe is also being asked to investigate what assistance it can offer to employers.
I'd use the toilet or get another beer, but that'd be it. I would spend all of my time on it, all week in the evenings and lunchtimes. I'd even try and get some in before work.
The harsh reality of his actions in front of him. Last night, his drive home from work ended in trauma. The two police officers setting up for their shift.
And whilst it's easy to say this is some sort of a tragedy, it is clearly not. And this is the actions of a driver that could have taken the life of any community member.
It's alleged the 22-year-old was texting on his mobile phone as he approached a random breath test site on Campbelltown Road.
Maya Abney, seen here, is ready to rumble. And Janelle Stevens could take on any bad guy in the film.
It was pretty intensive. We had to go through 8 hours a day of training, 4 months before we even got to camera. You bring it from your shoulder and you come diagonally down.
The warrior women showed us some moves used to strike at their opponents.
Come across your body, and this is mimicking hitting across their stomach, across their midsection.
About 3 in the morning, when people go to bed, I'd switch over to the American servers and play on them. I'd switch back to the UK servers about 7 or 8 in the morning. Yeah, I took it very, very seriously.
The nanoparticles that we're using to build this chip are about 100,000 times smaller than a hair.
It works like the human brain, and Professor Brown says it's smaller, faster and uses less power than anything else on the market.
It's not going to learn to control us and take over the world, but it's capable of thinking in the sense of recognising a pattern.
Business leaders like the idea.
WorkSafe could provide some effective guidelines and assistance to help employers develop processes to make sure that sexual harassment doesn't happen in the workplace.
The international Me Too movement is giving many women the power to speak out. This week, the local law firm Russell McVeigh was forced to front up to allegations of sexual harassment by staff against university students.
It's likely to be around a decade before it's fully functional, and its future could be in your phone.
It's difficult to predict at the moment whether this chip's going to be better at, reading a fingerprint or a retinal scan when you kind of sign into your phone.
The prototype chip is this tiny dot right in the middle here, and put simply, it works very much like the brain, mimicking what neurons do to process and transmit information.
My partner at the time wouldn't come into the room, and my children at the time wouldn't come near me. I can't believe it, but I didn't see that as a problem.
The seductive element to it is it allows a person to live in a world that's different from reality.
Distracted, he careered into senior constables Matthew Foley and Jonathan Wright, pinning the officers against their own car.
One of the officers sustained a serious fracture, and the other officer has unfortunately had part of one of his legs amputated as a result.
You heard a scream behind the sheets. You could tell he was in a lot of pain.
Naya Hope was Lupita Nyong'o's stunt double and says the actress is tough as nails.
She is very aggressive when she does her fighting, which was great because it's usually the actors don't really want to, be that active, but she was like, nah, I got it.
And the thing about addiction is it can be often very difficult for a person in addiction to live in the real world, as opposed to having to do difficult things in life like relationships, work and education and so forth.
We're, continue to be very sorry about what happened, and that if they need any help or support, we're here for them, and the door is always open.
The law firm Bell Gully also dealt with an incident in 2016 that they told One News Today clients subsequently raised with them. And while those firms say they have protocols and practices in place to deal with such incidents, Jan Logie's worried that many workplaces don't.
And if successful, it could be a global game changer.
We've put in place a number of strategies around IP protection globally, because we anticipate this is unique.
The technology is massive, and there's a lot of big companies around the world, Qualcomm and Intel and things like that, trying to bring this to life. And if we've managed to bring it to life in New Zealand and create it and patent it, then it could be a billion-dollar industry for us.
I constantly felt ill. I dropped weight. I was only 8 or 8.5 stone. I was very ill. But at the time, I was living that sort of life, 2 of my children are okay. I'm forming relationships with them, but one child I don't see. I'm hoping to again one day.